who can't tell the difference are at the bottom.
Who said that?
Oh, that's an old joke.
That's amazing. Not quite sure about that, being a Marmite fan myself. But for now, very good to have you both on. Kia ora to you both. Lovely panel. That's Heather Roy, Raf Manji. I'm back tomorrow, Tuesday, 3:45. See you then. Checkpoint next.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Now, haere aki nei, should pregnant returnees be given priority in MIQ? COVID cancellation culture, the events sector faces another dry summer due to red light restrictions. Over it yet? Well, plenty of people are. COVID fatigue is a thing. Lockdown hasn't put everyone off teaching their own kids. Homeschool applications balloon. Showing some heart, National leader Christopher Luxon declares it ain't just about the numbers, caring about people counts too. Lydia Ko's $500,000 payday and the goal that could postpone her retirement. Dust off your hiking boots, Te Urewera National Park is about to reopen, and the Hutt Valley heatwave. Don't sweat it, we've got you covered.
RNZ News at 5. Good afternoon, kia ora tātou. I'm Evie Ashton. A New Zealander in Australia was forced to care for her premature baby in hospital without family support after she was denied an emergency slot in managed isolation. The case has come to light since increased attention on the plight of Charlotte Bellis, a pregnant New Zealander stuck in Afghanistan. The woman, who RNZ has agreed not to name, says she sent MIQ officials 13 documents that warned her pregnancy was high risk. Even so, her application was denied 3 times.
Definitely needed family support around me. I mean, when your baby's in hospital for a long period of time, to do that without any family support is just cruel. It just feels like, New Zealand's turned its back on its own citizens.
Cabinet ministers are expected to discuss the country's border reopening plan tomorrow. Nationals leader Christopher Luxon says the party needs to change to avoid being outdated and crusty. A caucus retreat is being held in Queenstown. It started with a pep talk from George Osborne, a senior British politician in David Cameron's former Conservative government. Mr Luxon says National wanted to hear from the Conservatives on how they modernised a centre-right party before the 2010 UK election.
My challenge to the team since becoming leader is we have to change. I mean, we cannot be an old crusty National Party. We have to reinvent this party. It's got great principles and beliefs, and we haven't been articulating them well to the New Zealand people, and yet we have solutions and we have ideas and we care deeply about people. We have passion.
Christopher Luxon says it's common for political parties to rebuild themselves after losing their way. The Ministry of Health will no longer break down the specific variant of COVID-19 in its case numbers. As Tess Brunton reports, the move's being taken because Omicron is now the dominant COVID infection.
There are 91 new community cases and 39 new cases identified at the border. Of the cases, 1 in Wellington has been linked to an event in Auckland, and work is underway to identify exposure events. 1 new case linked to Soundsplash Music Festival in Hamilton has been reported in Tairawhiti. 4 further cases will be officially added to case numbers tomorrow, but 3 of them are also linked to the festival and existing cases. More than 13,000 COVID booster doses were administered yesterday, bringing the total to over 1.3 million. There are 10 people in hospital with COVID.
People in the events sector have major fears for their future, with most unable to ply their trade under the red light restrictions. Gatherings of more than 100 people can't go ahead in the current rules. Goff van 't Hof, who owns the production co, providing lighting and sound gear to concerts and festivals, says the financial support is too narrow.
If you're lucky enough to be on a show that is, I say lucky enough, to be on a show that's cancelled in the right time frame and people have registered and it's sort of meets the criteria, then there is money coming your way. But I'd estimate that that's probably, it would be under 10% of the people that should be working in events that will get money from that scheme.
Gough van Hoff says a lot of people have left the industry and others have had to significantly downscale. A fire in bush and peat in Waikato has been contained and the rail line has reopened between Amokura and Whangamarino. Sorry, that's Amokura and Whangamarino. The fire, which began yesterday evening, covered about 5 hectares alongside the main trunk railway at Mirimiri. With heat alerts in place across the country and more expected later in the week, people have been out enjoying the warmth. Lower Hutt reached 30 degrees today, and in one of the city's parks, people were taking advantage of paddle boats and water play equipment to stay cool.
We've come into the water to cool them down, and we've been in the shade. We are just about to go home and have some lunch because it is just too warm out here today. And we actually originate from Queensland. My children and I do, so the heat is comparable to that.
Met Service has heat alerts in place for Taupō, Lower Hutt and Queenstown today, and Napier and Christchurch on Wednesday. Now to sport, and Lydia Ko has won a 17th tour title by one shot with victory in the Gainbridge LPGA event in Florida. After a tense battle with friend and rival Danielle Kang, Ko finished the final round with a 3 under 69. She managed an expertly judged curling 7-metre putt on the 15th hole, edging her ahead of Kang. The world number 3 earns $460,000 for her efforts. Her last win on the tour was in April last year, and she credits coach Sean Foley for her consistency.
He's been a huge help in the technical standpoint, getting me to a point where I feel like it's natural and I'm not trying to make positions, and at the same time him clearing some of the questions and the not so good ideas in my head.
And Spanish tennis legend Rafael Nadal believes he can continue playing for a while yet. Nadal has spent the past 6 months battling injuries and COVID-19. He had said that the 2022 Australian Open could be his last. But after winning a record 21st Grand Slam title with a comeback victory over Daniil Medvedev last night, Nadal says he's feeling good and wants to carry on.
Of course, I feel more confident that I'm going to have the chance to keep going, keep fighting, and keep enjoying this beautiful sport that what's make me happy. I just feel confident now that I'm going to have my chances to keep playing tennis for a while, yeah.
And that's the news.
Lawyering up for a spot in MIQ.
Last year, there were over 250 pregnancy-related applications in New Zealand. Only around 10% had actually been approved. I've helped over 30 couples. 7 of those we had to take to the High Court.
Masking up for school.
It's good because it protects us. Yeah, same with them. It just protects everyone.
And giving up on Spotify.
This is going to snowball if more artists decide to do the same. Joni Mitchell's move is in solidarity, as she says, with Neil Young.
Up and at 'em. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You're with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next, but right now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. For Northland, cloudy periods and a few showers in the east. Scattered rain for a time tonight and tomorrow morning. Looking at Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupō, fine today with isolated showers about the eastern ranges of Bay of Plenty and Taupō. Cloudy periods tomorrow with patchy morning drizzle, then isolated showers from the afternoon. For Auckland to Wellington, including Taumarunui and Taihape, mainly fine, isolated showers in Auckland tomorrow evening. Gisborne to Wairarapa, cloud breaking for a time this afternoon with isolated showers about the ranges, mainly fine tomorrow, however occasional showers about East Cape. To the South Island now, Buller, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine, high cloud increasing tomorrow with isolated evening showers for Buller. Westland and Fiordland, mainly fine, isolated showers from tomorrow afternoon, turning to rain at night. Otago and Southland, isolated showers today. High cloud increasing tomorrow with scattered rain from the evening. And for Te Kohu, Chatham Islands, often cloudy. It's 7 minutes past 5. We'll have another news bulletin. Well, actually, we'll have the headlines for you at 5:30.
Nā mihi Evie, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A New Zealand woman was forced to care for her newborn in the NICU without any family support because her multiple attempts at securing an emergency MIQ room were rejected. There are growing calls to prioritise emergency MIQ spots for pregnant New Zealanders who want to return from overseas. They've been prompted by the situation of Charlotte Ballas, a pregnant New Zealand citizen in Afghanistan who's been trying to get an emergency spot. Here's our political reporter, Katie Scotcher.
This woman, who RNZ has agreed not to name, knew she wanted to return home from Australia to give birth as soon as she discovered she was pregnant. Getting home became even more urgent when she developed serious complications.
It was always the plan to go home and give birth and stay in New Zealand where I had all my family, as I don't have any support here at all. So that was always the plan.
After trying and failing to secure an MIQ spot in the lottery system 10 times, she applied for an emergency exemption. Her application included 13 documents which warned her pregnancy was high risk, but her application was denied because it didn't meet the emergency criteria, which states travel has to be urgent and within the next 14 days. Her case was appealed and escalated to the High Court, but it was too late. She gave birth in Australia and describes the experience as traumatising.
Definitely needed family support around me. I mean, when your baby's in hospital for a long period of time, to do that without any family support is just cruel. It just feels like, New Zealand's turned its back on its own citizens.
Tarandeep Singh and his partner are in India. They travelled there at the end of last year, thinking they'd be able to skip MIQ and isolate at home upon their return. But since the government delayed its reopening plans because of Omicron, their only option has been to apply for an emergency MIQ spot. Despite his partner being 30 weeks pregnant, the couple's request has been rejected.
They want us to provide two things. The first of them, a confirmation for a scheduled delivery or scheduled C-section delivery in New Zealand. And the second thing they want from us to confirm that there's no, to say something that's not possible in India to do this.
With the Omicron variant sweeping across India, Tarandeep fears what will happen if his partner is forced to give birth there.
We don't want to risk my wife and my baby's life when we already have right to go back to our country and get it done from there.
RNZ has spoken to another expectant couple who say they were only allocated an emergency MIQ spot after multiple applications and the threat of legal action. They say they have had complications with the pregnancy because of the stress of the situation. Plunket Chief Executive Amanda Malu wants the government to make it easier for pregnant New Zealanders to return home.
Just the right thing to do. I understand that there are a lot of people in various situations looking to get back home. These women are particularly vulnerable and we need to look after them.
In a statement, COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins insists there are spots in MIQ for expectant mothers. He says the emergency allocation criteria caters for a wide range of scenarios, including those specifically for an expectant mother or bringing their partner home to support them. In the case of Charlotte Ballas, the minister says she wanted to return to New Zealand on a specific date outside the 14-day window for emergency spots. He says she's been encouraged to consider moving her plans forward. Mr Hipkins says Ms Ballas has been offered New Zealand consular assistance twice since she returned to Afghanistan in early December, but has not responded. Head of MIQ, Chris Bunny, says pregnancy is not considered an emergency under the allocation criteria, but certain conditions during pregnancy may mean that the high bar for an emergency is met.
Well, homai o whakaro, we would love your feedback. Nō reira ānei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. Should priority be given to pregnant women for MIQ spots? And would that priority extend to their partners too? And how do we weigh that up against everyone else's need? For example, someone coming back to visit a dying relative. Let us know your thoughts. Pātui mai, text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is 13 minutes past 5. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai e haere nei. Coming up, the red light setting means it's a long dry summer for the event sector. The National Party's back, or at least that's the message Christopher Luxon delivered at the party's caucus retreat in Queenstown today. MPs descended on the resort town this morning where they were told to sharpen up and get out and about to meet their constituents. Our political reporter Annika Smith was there.
National MPs were in good spirits today off the back of a good summer break, their eyes set on the agenda for 2022.
Well, it feels fantastic today. It really does. Look, I think certainly for me, it's going to be a year focusing on the economy.
I just think it's a wonderful privilege to be a Member of Parliament.
Oh, well, look, I mean, for us, it's about the year of actually saying, look, we're back, and it's about proposing ideas that we can excite the New Zealand people about.
You heard it, the National Party is back. MPs were on message heading through the doors of the QT Queenstown, even Harete Hipango, a week after her Wikipedia editing faux pas.
It's not about me. It's not about any of us as individuals. The care, the concern and the regard has to be for New Zealanders in New Zealand, and that's where my focus is and that's where it will stay.
Judith Collins left the party spinning last year after a late-night kneecapping of Simon Bridges and a vote of no confidence from the caucus. She's laid low over summer and emerged as...
I'm very supportive of Christopher Luxon, Nicola Willis, and I have to say I think I'm really pretty much the ultimate team player. I'm just going to be working very hard in my electorate and also particularly in my portfolios.
The National Party hit reset after last year's leadership change, and this year the catchphrase is game on.
Really, our messages to our caucus is very simple. You know, it's game on. There's 7 quarters to go until the election, but there are things that we need to change about what we do and how we do it, and that's what we've talked a little bit about this morning.
Former British Prime Minister David Cameron was supposed to open National's caucus retreat, but caught COVID-19. His right-hand man, George Osborne, former Finance Minister, stepped in for him, dialing into the session via Zoom. Christopher Luxon says National can and will branch out from its bread and butter of economics and infrastructure, as Britain's Conservative Party did a decade ago.
Those are issues that historically, if centre-right parties just stay in the world of economic management and national security and law and order, we want to go have conversations on our biggest problems and be able to bring solutions to those.
This week's caucus retreat comes hot on the heels of new poll results that show Jacinda Ardern's approval ratings have dropped again. The latest One News Kantar public poll shows 52% of voters approve of the way Ms Ardern is handling her job, compared to 37% who disapprove. Former leader Simon Bridges says it's an opportunity the party must seize.
At the moment, we're obviously in a new phase. There's a sense that it's early days, but we have some momentum, and we obviously want to keep working on that to build the trust of New Zealanders.
Last night's poll results also showed 42% of voters approve of Christopher Luxon's performance as National Party leader, compared to 20% who disapprove. A further 37% were unsure or refused to answer, indicating a large chunk of people are yet to make up their minds about him. Mr Luxon is encouraging his MPs to get on the ground with stakeholders and constituents. He'll do the same on a walkabout in Queenstown tomorrow morning.
And we'll speak to the National Party leader Christopher Luxon shortly. Te Tai Tokerau tourism and hospitality businesses are reporting a quieter Auckland anniversary weekend than most. 2 suspected Omicron cases in the region connected to the Sound Splash Music Festival have sparked some nervousness for locals and visitors alike. Sam Ollie reports.
It's a long weekend for half of the North Island, from Taupo up, as well as the top of the South Island. But in Whangarei, you wouldn't know it. With suspected Omicron in the midst, these residents told RNZ they weren't venturing out too far.
I'm just going to the gym.
Anything else you've been up to?
No, not a lot really. Honestly, had a boring weekend.
Today I come here for cafe. Yesterday I went to Dargaville and Waipu, have a ticket tour.
And what about at home?
At home I do some gardening and play with my kitty, my cat.
Just at home?
beach trip day before yesterday, picnic on the beach, a wander down here and a few wines by the pool. Yeah, worked yesterday.
I just went and got my second jab, my COVID vaccine, and now we're having a go on the new purple scooters.
Jetson Group owner Lloyd Rooney has 3 restaurants in Whangarei. He also has one in Waipu and another in Mangawhai, where many out-of-towners with holiday homes eat and drink.
The 2 by the coast have definitely seen the same sort of trade or level of trade as last year, but the 3 in Whangarei definitely slightly quieter than last year. I think that people are being slightly cautious. I had some comments yesterday from a customer that wanted to sit on a certain table because they had concerns about Omicron, so the table was very well ventilated at the front of the restaurant.
Clapham's National Clock Museum is seeing a lift out of the lull in the long weekend.
It's been mostly out-of-towners and mostly from Auckland, but Auckland is usually our biggest market anyway, so we're delighted to see them back.
Senior Assistant Denise Scott says overseas tourists used to bring a long, busy season.
But because people can't come in from overseas, it's been really compressed into those main holiday periods.
Pre-pandemic, domestic tourists splurged $1.1 billion in Te Tai Tokiro a year. Aucklanders spent 60% of this, but the anniversary weekend hasn't made much difference for Finesse Kaido, who runs Tame the Beast tours with Harley-Davidson motorbikes and classic cars.
Someone who's travelled from Auckland to here 2 hours, right, to get to Whangarei, but they've got to travel back, you know, so it's time, yeah. So I would get more from those who'd spend a lot longer here in Whangarei.
Finesse Kaido says for her, it is the school holidays and Christmas that make a difference. She is hoping that will get her through until overseas tourists return.
We have to keep the face because we're the first ones that our tourists see and we introduce them to our regions. So we have to somehow keep that smile on.
Northland still needs to vaccinate 500 more people aged 12 and over to meet the 90% first doses target.
And it's 5:20. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Well, it's a roaster in the Hutt Valley this evening with temperatures nudging 30 degrees. Our reporter Somya Balmidi-Pati joins us from Avalon Park in Lower Hutt. Tell us, Somya, how hot is it now?
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, at the moment it's sitting at about 27 degrees, but earlier today when we were walking around the park talking to people, it was at 30. So Met Service has issued a heat alert because it's expected to be 30 degrees today and tomorrow.
And what have people been saying?
So people have been basically doing their best to enjoy the summer, but at the same time, you know, stay sun smart, not overheat. People have been making the most of the paddling boats that they've got out here and some water play equipment. So we asked people what they were doing to keep cool, and here's what they said.
So we've come to the park for a scooter and then to play around, and obviously he's found the one water feature, and at least it's better that than the duck pond. We had a swim this morning. We've got a pool up in the backyard. Had a swim this morning and thought we'll come here, burn off some energy.
Absolutely beautiful. It's supposed to be 30 degrees today. My daughter just said to me, Mum, we'll go to the park. They've got a water feature. So this is the first time I've seen it, but I think it's brilliant for the kids. That's what they need. And they can afford to get saturated.
I wanted to have a paddle in the water, or we may be going to go to this movie theaters and have popcorn and a cold drink. My nana drank the whole bottle of water and she had to go fill it up.
We've come into the water to cool them down, and we've been in the shade. We are just about to go home and have some lunch because it is just too warm out here today. Lunch. And we actually originate from Queensland. My children and I do, so the heat is comparable to that.
Probably go swim.
What about your trampoline?
Yeah, it's got sprinkles on it.
Cage around it.
Yeah, I'll
and
definitely go on that.
So they jump the water sprays to cool them down.
Some of the days it's been too hot and it's been quite noticeable. There's actually been less people at the park because there's not a vast amount of shade around, and I think some parents are more sun-wise than they used to be.
this summer we've had so much good weather, and like especially over the 30s. I'd be surprised if we're not over 30 today. So yeah, you've got to get them out and but also be sun smart, obviously.
Soumya, so it's a bit of a novelty for some locals. How long is the heatwave expected to last?
Well, as I said, Lisa, it's meant to be 30 degrees today and tomorrow, and then after that it drops to 29 degrees, and following that it's dropping by a degree or two a day, with some rain expected to set in on Friday, but temperatures are still expected to be in the early to mid 20s, so it is going to be a humid one even when it starts to rain.
Looks like a gorgeous day there, Soumya. Have you had a chance to stick your feet in that pond behind you to cool off?
I have not, Lisa. I'm a local from here, so I know what the state of the duck pond can be like. But it does look beautiful, so I am very tempted.
Nice to talk to you, Soumya. That's Soumya Barmedi-Pati, who is at Avalon Park there, and as she said, heat wave in Lower Hutt, temperatures expected to hit the 30 degrees mark and above. It's time for National to show more heart. That's one of the key messages from leader Christopher Luxon at the party's Queenstown retreat. The other, it's game on for next year's election. Mr Luxon told his MPs the party can't just be about economic stuff while leaving the social stuff to Labour, and they need to show how deeply they care about people. The National leader, Christopher Luxon, joins me now. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, Lisa. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. Let's start with MIQ before we get to your retreat. Just wondering, what would your policy be for pregnant New Zealand women wanting to return to New Zealand and MIQ spots?
Well, we actually called for it in November that we actually wanted an exemption for returning New Zealanders who are pregnant. I think, Charlotte Bellis is a no-brainer, but actually she's emblematic of a whole bunch of people behind her that don't have the same profile but have the same problem. So, for me, it's very, very simple.
Don't you think it's a tough one, though? Because how do you compare the needs of those people with someone who, say, has a father or mother who's dying here and they're desperate for a spot in MIQ too?
Well, I think that's what we've been saying. It's just, it's quite a cruel process, isn't it? A lottery of human misery is what we've been described as. And I think, as we get further down the road with Omicron, where the risk will actually sit in the community rather than at the border, you'll have to ask more questions about the relevance of MIQ as we go forward anyway.
OK, let's move on to your retreat. One of your key messages, your party needs to show that you care deeply about people, that it's not just about economics and numbers. So what's driving that message from you now?
Well, look, having looked at centre-right governments all around the world and centre-right political parties, one of the things is, yes, we're very good on economic management and national security and law and order and those sorts of traditional things. But I think there's two challenges. One is that people need to feel that we care about them deeply, and we do care deeply about people. And but then secondary, we need to use our centre-right politics and principles and beliefs and apply that thinking to some of the biggest problems and challenges that we have in this country. And so that's my challenge. I think it's a challenge of centre-right parties in general around the world, but certainly for the National Party too.
If you do care deeply and people haven't been seeing that, why do you think you've appeared, heartless or uncaring?
Well, look, I think we end up talking a lot around economics, and, we care deeply about making sure we have an economy that means that working people can get ahead. We care deeply about making sure that we have an education system that sets our kids up well for the future. Those are the sorts of issues that we want to be, that we do care deeply about it, but often because we've been narrowly bounded and actually just talking about, the economy exclusively, we live in a world where actually, a world where you have a National Party that just does the economy, Labour that just does the social stuff, and the Greens that just do the environment stuff. The environment, society and the economy are all inextricably linked, and they codependent upon each other. So you have to have a really integrated view and be able to bring solutions to those problems.
Has it been a mistake in the past of the National Party to focus too much on economics and dollars and cents?
Well, all I'm just saying is I want us to use our intellect and our principles and beliefs and use those, centre-right means to actually deliver very, progressive and good outcomes for people. I don't, for example, I don't think it's fantastic what's happening within education at the moment. We've only got 60% of our kids going to school regularly. We're in the bottom in maths, reading and science. So we need to go solve that problem. Why? Because we care deeply about kids having a shot at the Kiwi dream. But more importantly, education is the way in which people move in terms of social mobility. And so those bottom rungs of that ladder of social mobility are getting shot because we've got a very poor education system.
So
likewise,
will economics and social issues carry equal importance in weight in any government that you lead. Will you give that assurance now?
They're very interrelated, and so you can't have one without the other, right? If you don't have a strong society, you don't have a good economy, and you don't have a great environment. If you actually, the thing we have to make sure is, and we will always be about the economics, because fundamentally expanding our economic engine so that we actually have the money to invest in public services.
But if they go side by side, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to get to the nub of what actually this means for your policy, right? So if you think that those two things are inextricably linked, will you, for example, carry on with wellbeing budgets?
Well, we started some of that stuff with living standard metrics, right, in previous governments, which was a precursor to wellbeing.
So yes, you will carry on with a wellbeing budget?
We'll be thinking in a broader sense of just than economics, but I can tell you right now we also do have to deliver on economics, because the wellbeing budget is a lovely concept and it's been a lovely piece of talk from Grant Robertson, but it actually hasn't been implemented.
So you talked about in your speech, it's not enough to write off a whole portion of New Zealanders who are poor and doing it tough. So right now, give me one of your heart-filled policies from Christopher Luxon that is going to help those people who are on the very bottom of the ladder in New Zealand. What is it?
Well, I would like to see us work really hard at getting people from welfare into work programs at the moment. And we haven't got them. They're not working, they're not converting, they're not getting people from a world of dependence, and where we just write off a whole bunch of people and say you're going to live a life slightly better than poverty and subsistence through a welfare system. And actually, that's not. We actually expect more from you as a result, and we can help you get from welfare into work.
So that's a concept. What's the policy?
Spend money on that. Well, there's a whole range of things that we will actually. We'll, to be honest, Lisa, we're going to work that through in the coming year. That's the challenge to my team. That's what the message I'm sending them very clearly is. I'm expecting you to come up and not just criticise the government, but I want proposals. I want us to oppose and propose, and that's the work that I'm asking them to start off and get going with now. But there's a whole range of different tools that you could use, whether you use earned tax credits to incentivise work, whether you look at taxation thresholds for low-income work. There's a whole bunch of things that...
So will you cut taxes for low-income... Will you cut taxes for low-income families?
I'm just telling you where we are in the process right now is saying, look, we've gone through a leadership transition, we're resetting the National Party, we need to modernise it and we need to make it electable. Essentially, what we've got to do is oppose the government, but can't just criticise the government, we have to be able to propose ideas.
Which is why I'm asking you for your policy specifically. But I'm wondering how that messaging... I'm wondering how the messaging you've laid out today, which is to show some more heart and show people you care, how does that fit with having one of the kings of austerity, George Osborne, as a speaker? He has been described as inflicting some of the deepest sustained periods of cuts to the public service in the UK, and even himself said he was tougher than Thatcher. So how does that fit with the message that you gave today, having that person as a speaker?
We had the George Osborne there because actually what was relevant to us was where was the Conservative Party in 2005. It had been in power, it had been another government to come into power, and it was trying to make itself relevant, modern, and on point so that the British people could support it. That's what we were talking to him about. Having said that, what I'd tell you is that there was lots of interesting ideas in that period of time. If you think about what's happened around living wage, if you think about what they did around education standards they were on constant decline and moved back up, and the UK's done an exceptionally good job in the last 7 years, much better than New Zealand in terms of delivering maths, reading, science scores and educational attainment. So again, you can jump to a stereotype of who you think he is, and the other situation I say to you on the austerity cuts was pretty horrendous financial situation in a GFC in the UK. Here in New Zealand, I was overseas at that time. Here in New Zealand, we didn't feel it like you felt it in America or in the UK. And that's been the point that Simon Bridges and I have been saying in the recent weeks, is we're asking Grant Robertson to start to tweak and think about government spending that's up 68% in 5 years, because if he doesn't start to get it refined and focus on the things that really matter, we will be making some severe cuts. And if you care deeply about poor and vulnerable people, you don't want to make big cuts to programs because they end up being impacted the most. So my challenge to Grant is, fundamentally, if you care deeply about vulnerable people, you would manage the books well and you'd be a fiscal conservative.
We appreciate your time this evening. Thanks for joining us. That is the National Party leader, Christopher Luxon. Kia ora, E te iwi e Hairiaki nei e a checkpoint. About 60% of the eligible population has had their booster shot. We talk to a leading immunologist about why the rest of us should get our skates on and what's driving the rush on homeschooling. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback. Don't forget you can text us on 2101, tweet us at checkpoint RNZ, or you can email us checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Anei a Evie mina pita pita kōrero.
Kia ora tātou, here are the RNZ News headlines. I'm Evie Ashton. There's been a sharp drop in youth offending rates over the past decade. The latest Youth Justice Indicators summary report shows offending rates of 10 to 13-year-olds fell 65% between 2010 to 2021 and fell 63% among 14 to 16-year-olds. The number of Māori aged 14 to 16 appearing in the youth court has halved in 5 years. The Minister of Justice, Chris Luxon, says the reduction is likely to be part of cross-sector youth justice initiatives to prevent crime. The National Party's heard from a former British MP as it tries to modernise its image. George Osborne, a senior British politician in David Cameron's former Conservative government, has spoken at National's caucus retreat in Queenstown. Party leader Christopher Luxon says National was interested in how the Conservatives modernised a centre-right party before the 2010 UK election. A midwife's been fined nearly $15,000 for giving a woman in labour a placebo instead of the opioid painkiller she'd asked for. The Health Practitioners Disciplinary Tribunal has found the whakatane midwife's conduct was unethical and discredited the profession. More stories of hardship are emerging in the wake of the pregnant New Zealander Charlotte Bellis, who says she can't get a spot in MIQ. A New Zealander in Australia has been forced to care for her premature baby in hospital without family support after she was denied an emergency slot in managed isolation. And Tarandeep Singh fears his pregnant partner and unborn child will die in India during birth if they're not granted an emergency MIQ room. And at least 70 hectares of conservation and farmland has been destroyed in a scrub fire on Northland's Karikari Peninsula. 9 fire crews and 3 helicopters have been battling the blaze since 5:30 this morning. Fire and Emergency District Manager Wipari Henwood says strong easterly winds are making it difficult to contain the fire. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Thanks, Evie. No mai, Hawke mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nicholas Poynton, who's here with business news. Nicholas, let's start off with the local fund provider Kiwi Wealth reportedly being up for sale.
Yeah, kia ora, Lisa. Yes, according to a report from the Australian Financial Review, Kiwi Wealth's investors, now they include the New Zealand Super Fund, ACC and New Zealand Post, have appointed the investment banking giant Goldman Sachs to test the market. That's to see what sort of investor interest there may be in this company. Now, this comes after Kiwi Wealth's parent, it's Kiwi Group Holdings, received a number of unsolicited offers of interest in this particular fund manager. Now, for those who don't know, Kiwi Wealth offers a range of investment products to customers. Last year, it was awarded default KiwiSaver provider status. It also operates managed funds and provides tailored financial advice. It has about $9 billion in funds under management. Now, it's been reported that there would be plenty of interest in this company from across the ditch who could see this company complementing the existing sort of services that they already offer. It is also worth mentioning that a possible sale of Kiwi Wealth comes after its parent sold its sister companies, that's the online investment platform Hatch and its insurance business last year. Now, those recent divestments, they have led some analysts to suggest that its Crown investors want to focus on what may be called the core business that is managing Kiwi Bank. So we approached the Super Fund, ACC and NZ Post today to see if they could confirm or deny these reports that surfaced across the ditch this morning, and all of them said they wouldn't comment on market speculation.
And Nicholas, the New Zealand dollar falls to a 15-month low.
Yeah, we saw this in overnight trading. That says the dollar set around the 65.3 US cents mark. That's an 8% fall over the previous 3 months. And look, we spoke to BNZ senior market strategist Jason Wong today about this, and he says, look, the Kiwi is a spectator to bigger global forces. Anticipation that US interest rates will rise in response to higher inflation, they've all really strengthened the US dollar, because because as the logic usually goes, as the interest rate increases throughout the US economy, it tends to attract foreign investment because of better returns, which flows through to increased demand for and value of the US currency, which as a consequence has seen the value of the Kiwi ease against the greenback. Now, while inflation was a negative for the economy, the New Zealand dollar was a positive thing for exporters. Exporters must be making a lot of money at the moment, especially given the fact that some of our commodities, you think about things like dairy prices, meat and kiwi fruit, those sorts of things are all very high at the moment. However, it has to be said that, as BNZ mentioned, a weak currency was not necessarily a positive for importers, as it would lead to higher consumer prices. So once again, feeding into that wider inflation story that we can expect to hear about a lot this year.
And Nicholas, let's take a gallop around the markets.
Yeah, look, a quietish day on the NZX today, due to it partly due to it being Auckland anniversary. It was up 37 points to 11,889. The dollar has strengthened somewhat today. It's up now at 65.5 US cents and 93.6 Australian.
Thanks, Nicholas. Ka kite. Nicholas Poynton there with Business News. Only about 60% of eligible people have had their COVID booster shot so far, even though we are told it is the best defence against the highly transmissible Omicron variant. In real numbers, that's 1,287,972. So really, how important is the booster in protecting us from this highly infectious Omicron variant, and how long does that protection last? Well, joining me now is the director of the Mulligan Institute, who is also the director of the Vaccine Alliance at Aotearoa, New Zealand, immunologist Professor Graham Le Gros. Hi, Professor.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. There's lots of questions from people, so we'll crack into it. When you get your first booster, when you get your booster shot, how effective is it when you first get it, and how long does that protection last for?
Well, we're learning how long the protection can last for, because remember, these are new vaccines. But what's critical is that we have enough of a gap between the vaccination, which is dose 1 and dose 2, to allow the immune system to really sort of get itself in good shape. So when you give it a booster, it only stimulates those parts of the immune system you really want to make for the long term against this COVID-19 virus. We know it's been shortened down to 4 months. So we're looking at a booster effect, which is probably not ideal. We probably want a 6-month gap. But as you know, Omicron's with us. We've got to crack on with it.
So I saw a UK study and data out of the UK suggesting that the efficacy of that booster drops off significantly after 10 weeks. Should we be worried by that study?
That's in the Omicron, with the Omicron virus. Remember this all the time. This vaccine and the booster is made against the beta, whatever. So it's not against the Omicron. And that's why we're really at the margin. So I think that in the future we'll have different vaccines that actually can target the Omicron. So I'm not worried that it's falling off for protection against the Omicron, because it actually is a virus which has really tried to escape from the effect of that vaccine.
Do we then need to have a fourth shot, given that?
I think we will need future booster shots which target specifically the Delta and the Omicron virus. These are coming through the system. We're making them here in New Zealand. These will be the booster shots of the future. But for now, this is the best thing we have. It's safe, and it will protect you from Omicron, and it'll certainly protect you from hospitalisation and getting really sick. And make no mistake, Omicron can make you sick.
Graham, how far off are those more specific vaccinations for the particular variants, do you think?
Well, we're promised from Pfizer that they claim by March or April they're going to be pumping out. Whether we'll be able to get them here in New Zealand, I do not know. So we're hearing lots of things, but I'd say by the end of the year, there's enough things being developed through phase 3 clinical trials. They will start to become available for the regulatory authorities to consider.
Would we be better off having a cocktail of immunisations? For example, having the first 2 shots of Pfizer and making the 3rd shot AstraZeneca or Moderna. Would we have better efficacy against Omicron if we did that?
Too early to tell. Yes, there are slight nuances. It's always good to mix around your first set of vaccine with the second set of vaccine. But I'm not sure it's going to make much difference in this case, because they're all against the beta strain of the virus, which is really not what we're trying to deal with now, which is the Delta and the Omicron. That's the problem. That's why the immunity wanes. However, let's not get obsessive about the neutralizing antibody titers being generated. We're seeing good signs that if you had your booster shot, you're still protected against Omicron in terms of being hospitalised or getting really sick. So that's the good news.
Given the protection that it offers, and you say we shouldn't get too obsessed with that waning because it's still helping us out, should we be worried about the kids who are under the age of 18 and who are not getting the booster?
Very good question. Very good question, Lisa. Kids can get booster shots. There are issues around, I think we want to get all the kids vaccinated as soon as possible. We don't want to get all the doses used up and have some kids missing out. I think it's more about vaccine equity there at the moment. But there's no reason why kids couldn't have a booster, and it will protect them against Omicron. It's just that they're not the highest priority because, kids don't get as sick from the virus, so it's unlikely to have so much effect. But if it's your kid and they got sick, you'd really want to try and protect them against Omicron. I really do think boosters will come. They're available in the States. They are being given in the States. We'll probably have them here in months to come for kids.
As an immunologist, is it something that you would like to see, boosters for kids under the age of 18?
I think so. I think we love our kids so much and we want to protect them from everything. I think we need to give them a booster when it becomes available and it becomes sensible to do so.
We're almost out of time. Very quickly, how often can you get infected with Omicron, and are we seeing any trend of reinfection rates?
No clue there yet. I think that when you say reinfected, I think we're kind of safe at the moment. I think for all intents and purposes, once you've had the booster, once you've actually had, say, even an infection, you're pretty safe for a wee while. But with this virus, new stories happen. There's a new version of the Omicron coming through. I'm sorry, we're in for a long, tough haul for us with this virus and for winter coming.
Good to talk to you, Graham. That's immunologist Professor Graham Le Gros there. It is 17 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. And Muriaki ina pita pita kōrero after the news at 6. Over the whole virus thing yet? Well, you're not alone. COVID fatigue is a thing. Staring down the barrel of another lost summer, the country's venues, production companies and musicians fear many in the industry won't survive the red light. The government's offering to help some who have had to cancel festivals and gigs due to the change in traffic light settings, but there's no blanket support for the events industry this time around. And that's got some wondering how they'll pay the bills. Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe have the story.
Whammy Bar, K Road, but not as it should be. The stage deserted, the bar abandoned, the dance floor dead. OK, yes, that's because we're here mid-morning, but actually this scene represents something that ain't too far away from the current reality for this famed Auckland spot.
I'm really looking forward to us being able to get through this and not, after so long, have so many friends and important businesses and artists and things just say
Meet Tom Anderson. He's co-owned the joint alongside Lucy McRae for 7.5 years. The last 2 haven't exactly been rocking. The last week, the return to red particularly bleak.
I don't think any of us were expecting, any industry, anywhere were expecting to feature a global pandemic in that. So, we want to be here for another 7.5 years. This place forms a very important function for the city.
At Red, that function's stripped back, a sprinkling of small seated shows, good for morale, good for music and the artists, but one that barely covers costs. So how sustainable is all of this?
It's like playing a game of poker. At some point you have to fold, and it's short. I think for a lot of venues with no support and still having to pay overheads, you're looking as short as 4 weeks.
And this time around, financial support appears harder to come by. The likes of wage subsidies are on the scrap heap, though the new Arts and Culture Event Support Scheme allows event organisers to recoup the non-recoverable losses when gigs can't go ahead, thanks to Red.
But that's specific to a particular organiser having applied for that, being approved, and then it trickling down. I think that kind of is working more for slightly larger events.
At his Avondale base, the production co-owner, Goff Van Hoff, reminisces.
Just before lockdown, there were, maybe 12, 15 businesses in this park that were event businesses.
Fast forward less than 2 years.
I wouldn't have halved, but it wouldn't be far off. And those that are here have, significantly downscaled. So, like I said, you'd meet people in the car park. You'd see 8 people before you walk in the door, say hi, and those people just aren't here anymore.
COVID Year 1, 2020. Remember that? Well, the production co's revenue shrunk 50%. This year?
A lot worse than that. Before this current red light came in, we were already, way sort of behind on things. So this is just a further regression, I guess.
Parts of the biz moved online.
We actually invented a thing called Money for Jam, which was getting musicians together and having a jam and streaming it out once a week to try and raise money for a charity called Music Helps. So we were doing that here. People would want to, covers bands would want to record a show reel, so they'd come in and record it here and we'd do it out. We did a few things for Spotify and the like, where it's just an artist singing and going out to the net.
But like Whammy, the production co's core business is effectively shot. People in spaces at events. They ain't happening.
The support that's available now is very targeted. It's kind of like an insurance policy. And if you're lucky enough to be on a show that is, I say lucky enough, to be on a show that's cancelled in the right time frame and people have registered and it's sort of meets the criteria, then there is money coming your way. But I'd estimate that it would be under 10% of the people that should be working in events that will get money from that scheme.
Pretty violent, runners up in a casualty.
From festivals to the Home Office, Kurt Shank's summer schedule with his band Stella has been wiped.
Dunedin Craft Beer Festival at Forsyth Bar Stadium, Bay Rock Festival in Tauranga, Sunsetter Festival on the North Shore. There's a couple of other ones coming up, Selwyn Sounds in Lincoln.
And it's a double whammy. Shanks is a promoter too, working on bringing American band Violent Femmes to New Zealand. The tour was cancelled after multiple postponements.
Since then I'm in the process of postponing or cancelling a couple of tours. I've got a band UMI supposedly touring in early March. That won't be happening.
He too has grave fears for the biz, staring down the barrel of year 3 of COVID-19 disruptions.
Everyone's got to find a way of getting through till next summer and being optimistic again that we're going to get a summer.
As another summer disappears, the venues, the bands, the producers grow desperate for something, anything, to help keep the lights on.
And if you were listening to that on radio, do check out the video from our 2 Nicks. We'll put it up on our web page. Grab your hiking boots. Lake Waikato will reopen to visitors next month. Te Urewera National Park was shut back in August when Delta arrived and the country went into level 4. Tuhoi says Crown under-resourcing had made the Lake Waikato track unsafe. Now, access to the lake is reopening on Waitangi Day and the Great Walk will reopen in 2 weeks. Ko taku manuhiri e nai ko Tamati Kruger, Te Urewera Board Chair. Kia ora, Tamati.
Hi, Lisa.
Hey, this is good news, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. I think people that have been waiting for a long time to use the lake and get back into Te Urewera. It's something, Lisa, that we pledged that we would really try and do from around about November last year. So it's taken us all of this time to be able to open it up for those people.
Tamati, what took the time and what's changed that's allowed you to open up again? The impact of the weather events and COVID and the difficulty of getting people in that knew what they were doing and skilled to do the work, that was problematic. And of course the summer break when people were not available, that all accumulated to the delays. But we're there now. So a couple of things in there. Concerns about, I suppose it's maintenance and resourcing and funding. Has the government, kicked in any more money, Tamati, to allow this to happen?
Well, that's what we've been. The Te Rewera board have been working on getting those conversations to happen. So late last year, we finally got, I think, a forum to address those issues, and so we're waiting for those meetings to begin this month, and hopefully by the middle of the year, then we would have, I think, resolved those issues around funding and resourcing.
As I understand it, at the moment it's about just over $2 million a year you get in funding. What would you need that to go up to make it realistic in your view?
Well, possibly when we look at how much Te Rewera was being resourced when it was a national park, this was before the settlement with Tūhoe, it was around, from what I understand, Lisa, it was around $6 to $7 million. That's how much it was costing DOC at that time. So the reduction down from that figure down to $2.5 million, you can see there are problems, nothing but problems then that would occur. So we need to then understand between Tūhoe and the Crown what is the capacity of the Crown's commitment to Te Rewera for the next 5-10 years.
Do you reckon it should go back to what it was in dollar terms?
I think at least that you can't really justify, I think, a downgrading of resourcing over the last 7 years in any way. In anything, I think it should have been able to maintain at that level. If not, then increased from there.
Tamati, have you got the people with the skills to do the work that's needed and the upkeep?
Not at the level that we really wish to. We now know that we need to train these people ourselves. They're not standing by. They're not in a queue because this is no longer a national park, right? This is part of a settlement. The way that Tūhoe is looking at its reconnection with Te Rewera and how Manuhiri then factors into that. We're talking about a completely new game here and a new approach. So the people probably that we need to be in there for visitors, for Manuhiri, and to work with Te Rewera, these are people that we need to train ourselves.
Is it going to remain a great walk?
We hope it is going to be the greatest walk, Lisa. we know that we've inherited the Great Walk from the DOC ministry. We really want that to be one of the things that we review, and we think that we can do some improvements and better that walk.
So, Tamati, there's no suggestion it would be, taken away from that umbrella of a great walk. It would stay within that.
Well, that's one of the things as we look at evolving our commitment with Te Rewera and how the Crown is committed to that. The Great Walk is one of the things that we will have to look at. Are we happy with that? Is it up and fitting with the new Te Rewera look, or do we need to look at some other version of it? Yeah, so it is going to be something that we need to look at.
Ngā mihi mō te rā. Thank you for joining us. That is Tamati Kruger, Te Rewera Board Chair. Lydia Ko's early retirement plans look to be on shaky ground after winning her 17th LPGA title. Now a place in the prestigious Golfing Hall of Fame is within her grasp. The 24-year-old secured a one-shot win earlier today over close friend American Danielle Kang to win the Gainbridge LPGA in Florida. And elated Ko, who bagged almost $500,000 in winnings, paid tribute to Kang, whom she managed to edge out in a thrilling final round.
She's kind of taken me under her wing, and even though we may not text each other every day or don't live in the same cities, I feel like she's always got my back, and if she wants to talk to someone about anything, I'm always there for her as well. And there hasn't been many times where we played in the final group. I know that she's been playing such amazing golf, going into today. So I just tried to focus on me and try to play the best golf I can. I know at points it was a bit of a grind, but I'm glad that I could get that done.
Ko, who won bronze at last year's Tokyo Olympics, said she felt like she was regaining some of her old form, which saw her spend 85 weeks as world number one between 2015 and 2017. Despite a COVID-fraught 2021, she ended the year with 10 top 10 finishes, much of which she attributes to her new swing coach, Sean Foley.
Yeah, I think last year was kind of a big turnaround year for me, and even the fall of 2020, when we had that long time off, I think it was kind of a time for me to look back at, what are the things I need to work on and, just take a whole new approach to things. I started working with Sean, and I think he's been a huge help in the technical standpoint, getting me to a point where I feel like it's natural and I'm not trying to make positions, and at the same time him clearing some of the questions and the not so good ideas in my head as well. So yeah, I feel like it's been much more consistent, and last year I feel like even though I didn't win on the LPGA at the end of the year, I put myself in contention quite a bit, and I think when you keep knocking on the door, you feel like at one point it's going to open.
Ko had planned to retire by the time she's 30, but today's win makes her 1 point closer towards a spot in the prestigious LGPA Hall of Fame. She's now just 6 points short.
Obviously I have to play well, win to kind of collect those points along the way. All those awards and accolades and being in the Hall of Fame is great, and not many people are there. And if I could have my name alongside, the many amazing legends that are in the Hall of Fame, it would be a huge honor. But I know there's still things in my game that I want to improve and get better at to kind of give myself a run for it. My mom did ask me the other day, she said, hey, what if you're like near that retirement age and then you're like 1 point off, are you going to keep playing? And I think I just have to be realistic at that point, thinking, hey, do I think I can get this done or not? But when I'm out there playing, I'm just trying to make as many birdies as I can and try and shoot the best score I can and just enjoy being out here. And if I can get all those other things done at the same time, it is a bonus, like you say.
Lydia Ko has been tipped as one to watch at the British Open in July. Well, an overwhelming amount of feedback regarding pregnant women and MIQ spots. Meg says, blooming visiting sports teams soaking up MIQ spaces. Grrr, says Meg. Another person says, regarding the pregnant journalist, why would she go to Afghanistan when New Zealand citizens don't need a visa to stay in Europe? Another one here saying it's time to end MIQ. There's nothing to hide from anymore. Omicron is here, so let's not putting people through hell for no benefit to anyone. Another one says, Lisa, this is a total media beat-up. Miss Ballas left New Zealand in 2015 to work for Al Jazeera. She ignored the government's call to come home in February 2020 because her career and the big money was more important than the virus.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, kia ora tātou. I'm Evie Ashton. A New Zealand citizen fears his pregnant partner and unborn child will die in India during birth if they're not granted an emergency spot in MIQ. Tarandeep Singh and his partner have been stuck in India since the government delayed its border reopening plan because of the Omicron variant. Mr Singh says despite his partner being 30 weeks pregnant, the couple's request has been rejected because they didn't provide evidence of a scheduled medical treatment in New Zealand. With Omicron sweeping across India, he fears what will happen if his partner is forced to give birth there.
We don't want to risk my wife and my baby's life when we already have right to go back to our country and get it done from there.
Head of MIQ, Chris Bunny, says pregnancy of itself is not considered an emergency under the allocation criteria, but certain conditions during pregnancy may mean that the high bar for an emergency is met. There's been a steep drop in offending by young people. The latest Youth Justice Indicators summary report shows youth offending rates have fallen more than 60% over a decade. Offending rates of 10 to 13-year-olds fell 65% between 2010 and 2021 and reduced by 63% among 14 to 16-year-olds. The number of Māori aged 14 to 16 appearing in the youth court has halved in 5 years. The Minister of Justice, Chris Luxon, says one reason could be cross-sector youth justice initiatives to prevent crime. Nationals leader Christopher Luxon has issued a challenge to his caucus, saying the party needs to reinvent itself and broaden its focus beyond economic issues. The opposition MPs are in Queenstown for their annual retreat, which kicked off with a speech from former British Finance Minister George Osborne. Mr Luxon told reporters the caucus could learn from the UK Conservative Party's experience in 2005.
We cannot be an old crusty National Party. We have to reinvent this party. It's got great principles and beliefs, and we haven't been articulating them well to the New Zealand people, and yet we have solutions and we have ideas and we care deeply about people, we have passion, and that's the work that we've got to get into.
Christopher Luxon says many centre-right parties face a perception problem with voters thinking they're not compassionate. Auckland anniversary weekend has been quieter than usual for many Te Tai Tokerau businesses. 2 suspected Omicron cases connected to the Soundsplash Festival have sparked nervousness for Northlanders and visitors alike. Sam Ollie reports.
Jetson Group owner Lloyd Rooney's 3 restaurants in Whangarei didn't get anything like last year's patronage. He puts it down to Omicron, and Tame the Beast Tours owner Finesse Cairo says the long weekend made little difference for her. During the pandemic, her only spikes in business have come from school holidays and the Christmas breaks. Pre-COVID, domestic tourists splurged $1.1 billion in Te Tai Tokerau a year. Aucklanders spent 60% of this.
A community advocate living between Napier and Taupo says she's struggling to know what to do next after a meeting about the Napier-Taupo road late last week. Most of the speed limit on the road is changing from 100 kilometres to 80 kilometres an hour from February the 18th. Kiri Goodspeed met with Waka Kotahi, local MPs and others to discuss these changes, which she and many other locals are against. She says although she appreciated the conversation, Waka Kotahi's stance seems immovable.
The meeting on Friday was slightly disappointing from a community point of view. There was nothing new or important to report back.
Kiri Goodspeed is thinking of seeking a judicial review, public inquiries or an injunction in the High Court. Spotify says it's working to add advisory warnings to any podcast on its platform that discusses COVID-19. The move follows criticism of the music streaming company's work with Joe Rogan, a US podcast host who's interviewed vaccine skeptics. The BBC's Peter Bowes has more.
The founder of Spotify, Daniel Ek, says in the next few days the platform will add a content advisory to any podcast episode that includes a discussion about the pandemic. It'll direct listeners to a dedicated COVID-19 hub where he said data-driven facts, up-to-date information as shared by scientists, physicians, academics and public health authorities would be available. He added that the service had a critical role to play in supporting creator expression while balancing it with the safety of its users.
And people in the US state of Florida are being warned to beware of frozen iguanas falling out of trees. Unusually cold temperatures are slowing down and even immobilising the big lizards. A reptile expert at Palm Beach Zoo says freezing temperatures are dangerous for green iguanas. The hot-blooded reptiles are not native to Florida, with their natural range closer to the equator. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Nigel Collins is at the cusp of classical and pop music with the sounds of Joni Mitchell, Johnny Greenwood and Fleet Foxes. Peter Lamp is coming to terms with sport in the time of Omicron. Plant breeder Greg Reeves on the art of grafting and why he's excited about being able to graft bananas. And we are night swimming in this week's Little Moment of Calm. So join me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 this evening on RNZ National.
We're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're back with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint shortly, but right now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. For Northland, cloudy periods and a few showers in the east, scattered rain for a time tonight and for tomorrow morning. Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo, fine today with isolated showers about the eastern ranges of Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Cloudy periods tomorrow with patchy morning drizzle, then isolated showers from afternoon. Auckland to Wellington, including Taumadu Whanganui and Taihape, mainly fine. Isolated showers in Auckland tomorrow evening. Gisborne to Wairarapa, cloud breaking for a time this afternoon with isolated showers about the ranges. Mainly fine tomorrow, however, occasional showers about East Cape. For Bulla, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine. High cloud increasing tomorrow with isolated evening showers for Bulla. Westland and Fiordland, mainly fine. Isolated showers from tomorrow afternoon turning to rain at night. Otago and Southland, isolated showers today. High cloud increasing tomorrow with scattered rain from the evening. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, often cloudy. The time is 7 minutes past 6. We'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai Hawke mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. As thousands of kids head back to the classroom this week, a rapidly growing number of families are choosing to keep their tamariki at home for school. Figures from the Ministry for Education show home education applications in November jumped to nearly 900, well up from less than 200 the year before. The Ministry says right now so many applications are being dealt with, it's taking more than 6 weeks for each one to be assessed. COVID changes and mask mandates are adding to the demand. Earlier, I asked Shirley Irvia from the Auckland Home Educators Committee about the numbers.
There's been quite an increase, but obviously at this time of year there always is. It's the back to school season. But I think also we've kind of reached the tipping point where home education is becoming more accepted. People have heard of it, they know somebody who's done it, they've seen good results. It's not such an unusual choice anymore. And so I think people are feeling a little bit more brave and comfortable to actually to choose this option for their children because they see some benefit, obviously.
How much has COVID had to do with this?
I think for some people it has been a push factor. I think all the disruption with schooling and lockdowns has possibly contributed to it. But I think it's also been a wonderful opportunity where they've been able to kind of test drive what it's like working at home and having their kids at home and managing the schooling and juggling all of that. And so I think it's given them an opportunity to see that it's possibly not as daunting as they may have initially have thought it would be to take on educating their children themselves.
So surely you don't think lockdown and schooling from home has scared them off?
Well, I'm sure there are some parents who have the attitude of, you know, I'm happy that my kids can go back to school. But I think many parents have seen that it enables them to have a different kind of lifestyle and to be more involved with what their children are learning, to cater to their children's unique needs, perhaps where there's special needs or just personalities and interests that are different to sort of what the average is in school.
What's the mask mandate? What influence is that having, and is there much discussion about it?
There are some comments, but, some parents don't want their little kids in particular wearing the mask. I think with the summer heat, it might be an influence, but, home education is a long-term commitment. So I don't think it's something that people just decide to do willy-nilly. I think it is something that they need to have more than one reason to do, and I don't think that reason would be such a strong factor. I don't think it would be the only factor. Definitely not.
So some people are talking about the mask mandate in the sense that they don't want their kids to have to wear masks, but what you would think that's not a strong enough reason to embark on homeschooling?
I think, as I said, for some people it may be, but I think there's probably more than that to it. I think there's other reasons that people are making this choice because it's a big decision. It's long term. Yeah, we don't quiz people when they ask for information about home education. We just give them the information that they need. So I think there are some, but I can't say how many, and I can't imagine that that's the main push for the increase. I think it's more that home education has also had more media attention because of the lockdown. But I think also just as it grows in a country and more people get exposed to somebody who's been home educating, the more they realise that it's a workable option and it's not so alternative, perhaps.
So surely can anyone just say they want to homeschool their children and go ahead?
Well, pretty much yes, but you do legally need to submit an application for exemption from schooling to the Ministry of Education. So, a parent can make that decision. It's their responsibility, and then they need to submit the application to the ministry, and it takes a couple of weeks to process. And once they've got that exemption from schooling, then they can, embark on home education.
What sort of feedback have you got from people who've made the switch?
In the first year, many parents do still feel a little bit, they're still finding their feet, so they are not as confident. But usually once that first year is over and they're starting to find their groove and they see that their children are actually learning and they can do this, their confidence grows in leaps and bounds. And, home education, what they often discover is that it's not only about academics, it's about the relationship between parents and children and even siblings in a family. And that's the hidden blessing of home education. You get to build those relationships and work on them, and it's really good for everybody all round.
Shirley Irvia from the Auckland Home Educators Committee. New year, new variant, but same old COVID. We're now in a third year living with the virus, but with waning energies about how to deal with COVID among us. Kim Moody has a look at the impact of COVID fatigue.
We're just a month shy of the 2-year anniversary of New Zealand's first nationwide lockdown. But for some, the team of 5 million sentiment feels like years ago. Clinical psychologist Dr. Saab Johal says years of living under the so-called new normal is adding up.
When people first started to have to go to the shops to get their own food and having to think very carefully about every single step that they took in terms of managing their exposure, getting out of the car, getting into the supermarket, getting it home, all of these actions start to add up and it feels quite wearing. And when you're superimposing this on a background where people are already feeling quite fatigued and tired, then that can happen quite quickly.
He expects people will quickly feel tired and over it when Omicron cases really ramp up. Adding to that, we're now reframing how we live with COVID-19. Dr. Johal says early on, New Zealand anchored to the idea of eliminating the virus and see the daily case numbers as proof of the strategy working or not. But COVID modellers say we could see case numbers as high as 1,000 a day in the next week.
What does that signal to us? And it may not signal necessarily that it's unexpected or that we are in any kind of really significantly increased danger, so long as we are behaving in ways that maintain our safety in the face of the new threat. And I think that that's the big psychological shift that we need to make, is what can we do in this new uncertain environment that continues to keep us as safe as possible?
Way back in the first lockdown, New Zealanders got behind the team of 5 million sentiment and were able to stamp out community transmission. Strategic political communications expert Dr. Edward Elder likens getting the public on board with major shifts, like public health measures to suppress the virus, to a seesaw.
On one end of the seesaw, you've got your responsiveness. So are you showing that you are respectful of criticism from the public or concerns and that sort of thing? Then on the other end, you've got your leadership, so making tough decisions, communicating that you're making tough decisions, but also that you're competent about it. And then what is sort of the pillar to that seesaw, so to speak, is, I guess, credibility, which comes from, do the public trust you? Are you seen as honest?
He says the government was able to balance that well in the early days of the virus, but now people need a new goal to get behind.
Showing that the government understands the hardships people have faced around the pandemic, it's still communicating that, but then maybe communicating clearly the new end goal that the government is trying to get to in a way that is not just palatable to the public, but that brings them in.
Auckland University politics lecturer Lara Greaves says there's no data that shows public sentiment towards COVID-19 measures has turned. She says the government's walking a tightrope between helping people understand the seriousness of COVID-19 and scaring them.
There is an optimum amount of fear that's needed. So you don't want to have no fear, but you don't want to have too much fear, because there's been decades of academic literature showing that people, if they're too afraid or they're feeling too much of an emotion, they don't absorb the message as well. There has to be some level of fear so people act, and so people do actually get it together and they do realise that it's happening, but not too much that they overreact or they shut down in some way.
She says it's a tricky task to balance, something that will continue to play out through the Omicron outbreak.
Spanish tennis legend Rafael Nadal has turned back the clock to power to a historic win in Melbourne. Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic have congratulated their long-time rival after Nadal became the first man to claim a 21st Grand Slam title. The 35-year-old has spent the past 6 months battling injuries and COVID and had said that the 2022 Australian Open could be his last. Sports editor Stephen Hewson has more.
It's 21 for Rafa, and he stands alone at the summit of men's tennis.
6-4. Rafa Nadal's victory over Daniil Medvedev in a 5-set thriller, which lasted over 5.5 hours, now puts him one clear of Roger Federer and world number one Novak Djokovic in the all-time Grand Slam title race in the men's singles game. Djokovic had been the top seed for the tournament but was unable to play after he was deported from Australia on the eve of the tournament in a dispute over COVID-19 entry requirements and his unvaccinated status. While Federer missed the tournament as he continues to recover from knee surgery. It's Nadal's second Australian Open victory, having first won the title in 2009.
I lost a lot of times here, having chances. Sometimes I was a little bit unlucky, so I just wanted to keep believing till the end. No, I just wanted to give me a chance, and that's what I did. Just fight.
And he says his recipe for success is simple.
Love for the game, passion, positive attitude, and work in the spirit. That's all. No, and the right people next to me, helping every single day.
Runner-up Daniil Medvedev says the way Rafa Nadal played was surreal.
2 sets to love up, I was like, come on, just go for him, go for more. Even 5th set, I was just make him run. He was unreal. He was really strong. Like, the way he played, I was even surprised. But, of course, we know how Rafa can play.
The 35-year-old Nadal had hinted ahead of the tournament that this could be his last Australian Open, but he's now talking about returning to Melbourne in 2023.
Of course, I feel more confident that I'm going to have the chance to keep going, keep fighting, and keep enjoying this beautiful sport that what makes me happy. I just feel confident now that I'm going to have my chances to keep playing tennis for a while. Yeah.
Nadal's Australian Open win means that he's now just the 4th men's player to win all 4 Grand Slams at least twice.
It's 19 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Locals and leaders in Hawke's Bay are making last-ditch attempts to try and stop lower speed limits on the highway between Napier and Taupo. The speed limit on most of the road is set to change from 100 to 80 kilometres an hour from February the 18th. Transport agency Waikato isn't budging, and this is firing up locals. Our Hawke's Bay reporter Tom Kitchen has more.
Hawke's Bay residents are seeing red at the prospect of a slower drive on State Highway 5. They held a meeting with MPs in Waikato last week. Local advocate Kiri Goodspeed was underwhelmed.
The meeting on Friday was slightly disappointing from a community point of view. There was nothing new or important to report back.
She says it seems Waikato are immovable.
There are other mechanisms available to us, and that would be public inquiry, it would be injunction in the High Court, judicial review in the High Court, and formal complaint through NZTA and then on to the Ombudsman.
A petition to keep the speed at 100 has over 4,700 signatures. But local MP and Cabinet Minister Stuart Nash has told Kiri Goodspeed it's an operational decision and there's not much MPs can do. Waikato had a different take on the meeting.
It was very valuable to have that time to engage with community representatives as well as ministers, MPs, iwi and Hastings District Council.
Director of Regional Relationships for the Central North Island, Linda Stewart, says they'll meet again in a couple of weeks to nut out how they can improve the highway's safety.
We're beginning that process now to get their feedback on what they think should happen on that corridor. That could be intersection improvements, it could be road widening, could be better line markings, wider centre lines, side barriers.
The Hawke's Bay Regional Transport Committee has scheduled an extraordinary meeting this Thursday. Chairman Martin Williams wants the committee to come up with a strong position on the speed limit change.
We're talking about a decision that affects, the absolute lifeblood. You could even call it the aorta of our interregional transport network.
He says Hawke's Bay needs to drive home their message to government.
I think this region needs to stand up to Wellington and ensure that that corridor gets the attention it deserves and that this region deserves.
At the other end of the road, Taupo Mayor David Chewavitz says he backs Hawke's Bay leaders' anger over the decision, despite his council staff telling Wahokotahi they supported the speed drop.
Our biggest concern is for the business, commercial operators and all that sort of thing. They will, take a bit longer to get to port and what have you. So, I can understand where they're coming from.
A community meeting on the highway hold-up was set for next week, but Omicron has put the brakes on that for now.
The UK's COVID vaccination program has been extended to vulnerable children between 5 and 11 by the NHS. Eligible children, including those with diabetes, epilepsy, learning disabilities and those living with someone who's immunosuppressed. The BBC's Palab Ghosh has more.
Xavier is 11 and he's among the first in his age group to have a COVID jab at the Emberbrook Health Centre in Surrey. He has epilepsy, which makes him more vulnerable to the virus. The overwhelming majority of children have only mild symptoms, but there are around 500,000 5 to 11-year-olds who are more at risk, and the government has decided that they should be vaccinated. More than 850 sites have been set up across England, and this is Xavier's message to any young children worried about having a jab.
It's not as stressful as you may think. Everybody here is quite nice and you get a sticker at the end.
Children will get 2 10-microgram doses of the Pfizer vaccine at the centre 8 weeks apart, a third of the amount used for adults.
Well, I think it's very important for them to be brought in and to be seen so that they can regain some sort of social interaction. They can get back to the normal activities of daily living that the rest of us take for granted.
The Scottish Government has also started to send letters to parents of at-risk children inviting them to be vaccinated. They're also being asked to come forward in Northern Ireland.
With less than a week until the start of the Winter Olympics in Beijing, the Chinese capital has reported its highest number of COVID-19 cases in 18 months. Some areas are being locked down, while organisers of the Olympics have reported 34 new infections within the event's bubble. But those same organisers are optimistic about an event with its fair share of controversy. The ABC's Tracy Holmes has more.
The International Olympic Committee has the honour to announce the host city of the Olympic Winter Games 2022, Beijing.
The IOC President Thomas Bach could not have known a global pandemic would start in the Olympic host nation, causing a one-year delay to Tokyo's 2020 Summer Games and requiring extreme measures for its own games starting on February 4. Nor could he have known a Chinese tennis player would post an online expose of an affair with a former senior vice president of China, leading Western nations already diplomatically boycotting the Games to jump on her alleged disappearance from public view with the hashtag #WhereIsPeng But Bach and other officials must surely have known that China's human rights abuses would again be a flashpoint, as they were before the 2008 Beijing Summer Games. China has remained silent on Peng Shuai, said that boycotting politicians weren't invited anyway, and have discredited reports into the treatment of detained Uyghurs in Xinjiang, including the People's Tribunal chaired by UK barrister Geoffrey Nice QC.
It's not the case that powerful nations, and there's no nation more powerful now than China probably, take no note of international public opinion. They do not want to be regarded as a pariah. And most important, they don't want their other interests, commercial interests, to be affected by things that could be corrected.
Organisers of the Games are most wary of COVID. In the past week, almost 350,000 daily tests have been conducted for a total of 139 positives. 102 of those picked up at the airport before entering the strict Beijing COVID bubble. The head of the IOC's medical expert panel for Beijing, Dr. Brian McCloskey, says the system is working, but that doesn't mean he's happy.
But we are confident that the system we have in place is the right system.
Happiness is not a word currently associated with these games, but the CEO of Olympic Broadcasting Services, Yanos Exarchos, says the world is weary and points to Friday's opening ceremony when he says the world needs something to celebrate.
People have gotten very tired of measures and lockdowns and so on. I think that people cannot stand any longer not being close to each other.
There's no need to keep your laptop open or answer your boss's messages late at night. At least that's soon to be the case for thousands of workers in Belgium, the latest country to introduce what's known as the right to disconnect. From this week, 65,000 civil servants will gain the legal right to be offline outside of their agreed working hours. The BBC's Jessica Parker reports from Brussels.
The sound of nutmeg being grated as Delphine Pirot prepares hachis parmentier, a sort of shepherd's pie. Off work for the evening, she's making dinner for her friends in her apartment. Onions are being chopped, a few beers opened. The 36-year-old civil servant welcomes ways to help people switch off.
Especially for young people, it's not always clear when they have to be available or not. Because when you begin a new job, you want to be perfect, you know? And you think, if I don't answer that email at 10 o'clock at night, maybe my boss will not like it. So now I think it's going to be a cultural change.
The new rules mean bosses can't get in touch outside normal hours, although there are exceptions. People also shouldn't be disadvantaged by not answering calls and emails. The idea, better well-being, less stress. So what do people in Brussels think?
It's a good idea as people move more and more towards digital work especially.
You work your 8 hours and then you go home.
I think it's part of the job. To be there when it's necessary.
Opposition from like the Liberals or...?
Not really.
In a rather grand government building in Brussels city centre, I meet the minister in charge of the law change, Petra de Sutter.
And this is the real disease of today.
She says there are plans to expand it to the private sector, but critics question the need for further regulation. What would you say to people who suggest this is actually a bad idea, inefficient maybe?
It is a misconception to think that you really should work 24/7 because we see that a lot of people cannot cope with that and they are falling out.
Back at Delphine's, dinner is in the oven. The timer's on. Similar laws have been introduced in France, Italy and Spain. It's all about time and how we use it.
Well, thank you for all your feedback this evening. Lots on the issue of pregnancy and spots in MIQ. We can't read it all, but most of you say it's time for that MIQ system to change. That's all we've basically got time for this evening. Keep across the late news. That team will keep you updated throughout the night. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi pōpō tomorrow from 5 on First Up. Forget that jewellery box that you made in woodworking class. Hawke's Bay High School is teaching students to build a 3-bedroom home. Yep, 3-bedroom home. Back tomorrow. Catch you then.
RNZ News headlines. Kia ora tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. Nationals leader Christopher Luxon has told his caucus that the party needs to reinvent itself so it doesn't become old and crusty. The latest youth justice report shows offending rates of 10 to 13-year-olds fell 65% in the past decade. Lower Hutt reached 30 degrees Celsius today as heat alerts are in place on Taupo, Queenstown, Napier and Christchurch. And firefighters will remain at a scrub fire on Northland's Karikari Peninsula overnight. At least 70 hectares of vegetation have been destroyed. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tomorrow after 1pm on Afternoons with Jessie Mulligan at the tender age of 7, Molly Wright did something that Bill Gates, Bono and even Stephen Hawking had done before her. The Queensland primary school student is the youngest person ever to give a TED Talk.